Hello and welcome to Oklahoma Gardening. I'm your host, Brenda Simons. Well, mid to late April is when the hummingbirds start showing up in Oklahoma, so it's time to get those hummingbird feeders hung. Now, just a few reminders: you can make your own hummingbird solution by dissolving 1 part sugar in 4 parts water. You just need to boil the water, remove it from the heat, and then add the sugar. Let it cool and fill your bird feeder, and then store any leftover solution in the refrigerator. Now be sure not to add anything like honey, artificial sweetener, or red food coloring to the hummingbird solution because those are all detrimental to the hummingbirds. Well, in addition to putting up hummingbird feeders, if you'd like to attract hummingbirds to your yard, we thought a review of some of the great hummingbird plants would be good before you go out shopping this spring. And if you're looking for bushes that attract hummingbirds, you'll be glad to know that azalea is one of them that does. And it is a wonderful shrub for shady areas, and it also blooms early in the year, which is a good thing to think about with hummingbirds, is to space those blooming plants out. Now, a couple other shrubs that bloom that are good for hummingbirds are the abelia and also the weigela, which actually grows in full sun. And these will bloom later in the year so that you can space the blooms out. Now, a couple of vines that are very good for hummingbirds are, one, if you want an annual vine, is the morning glory. Now, if you're looking for a perennial, kind of a woody vine, trumpet creeper is a classic hummingbird plant because it has a long tubular orange flower and grows very well, blooms all season long. Now, one thing to think about is if you're planting a trumpet creeper, don't try to plant it in a confined space because it has a tendency to ramble. But if you've got room for it to spread out and you don't mind, it is a wonderful hummingbird attractor. Now, there are several annuals and perennials that are great for hummingbirds that we planted in our gardens last year, and I just wanted to review those really quick. Now, one of the really great performers for us were the agastache that were planted in the hummingbird garden. These were a beautiful flower all summer long, and they kind of had a more wild look that they gave to the garden. Bee balm is another one that is wonderful for hummingbirds, and it's pretty much maintenance free. Now, it does tend to get invasive, so if you've got a small spot, you might want to plant it in a tub instead of just putting it out there to take over. Another plant that worked great and was very striking in the garden was the cardinal flower with its bright red blossoms, and also it had red foliage on it. 4 o'clocks are another great hummingbird flower, and they self-seed very readily. Petunias are a classic gardening plant, and you'll be glad to know that they as well are a hummingbird flower, and they have the nice tubular shaped blossom. They're another plant that you can put out earlier in the season to feed those birds before the other plants come into flower. Penstemon was a great plant for a hummingbird garden, and the Cambridge series performed very well for us. Finally, the sage and salvias work very well, and you can start with some of the annual garden salvias since they're already blooming, and then when the perennial salvias come into bloom, your hummingbirds will have food all season long. So, while you're out shopping for plants, if you're also interested in attracting hummingbirds to your garden, you might add some of these plants to your list.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.